Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 300 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. All right, like I said, today's episode 300, which, although it's really episode like 351 because I've done so many special episodes, this is the 300th real full episode where we had all the segments. So I wanted to do something special. First of all, I got to mention Perform Better. This show has been going on. It's in November 1st or October 24th. I think I posted episode 0, but November 1st was episode 1 in 2007. But that summer, at the end of the summer, I had gone to Chris Poirier and talked to him about doing this and asked him if he would be interested in sponsoring this so I could make a little bit of money while I do it, so I didn't have to just do it for free. And he agreed right away. And he's been an integral part of the podcast. Perform Better has been an integral part of the podcast ever since. So, I mean, we would not be here. I would not be here if it wasn't for Chris. And then going to Mike and talking to Mike Boyle about, hey, Mike, listen, here's a great way to promote your new site, strengthcoach.com, which had started in September of 2007. So kind of everything just fell together, and we're still going strong. 2 episodes a month, lots of special episodes. Hopefully we've created a lot of value. Obviously we have some new segments as well. And from my perspective, we're going to keep going for as long as we, you guys are listening. So thank you for all of that. So what we're going to do today is something special. I actually have on 5 of the first guests of the show from 13 years ago. So Shawn Skahan was episode 1. Shawn was with Anaheim Ducks. Now he's with the Minnesota Wild. Shawn Windle, who was with the Pacers then, he's with the Pacers now. Sean Hayes, who was with the Buffalo Bills, he's now with the University of Georgia. And by the way, I did not plan on the 3 Shawns for the first 3 episodes. Brijesh Patel, I think he was episode 5. And he was at Holy Cross with Jeff Oliver, and then right after that he went to Quinnipiac, and he's still there. And Sarah Cahill, who was at the University of Oklahoma, and she's had a really diverse career, which has been awesome. We're going to talk all about it. And she's has a new venture called Movement in a Box. And I had Coach Boyle on doing this as well. Same questions for all of them. 3 things that they've learned over those last 13 years. They have to give me a do-over from that time. And then 1, 2, 3 things, whatever, that they would tell an up-and-coming strength coach to be successful in this profession. So there's definitely some through lines here, but interesting, certainly with the 3 things that you've learned. Question, a couple, went about life, a couple went about things that they've learned from training. So just really interesting to hear from them again after 13 years. So very cool, coming up in a little while. All right, like I said, we have a couple new segments. The Fit to Speak segment, Jenny Rarick is on to discuss virtual communication and what you can do to make it a great experience for the people on the other end of the camera. This is common now, right? We're in a new world, and we all have to learn how to do this. There's a lot of virtual training, online training, and really we're using Zoom a lot more. So just going to give you a lot of tips. Speaking of that, the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment, Tim Robinson and Adam Doughty are going to discuss how athlete motivation changes over the customer life cycle, the difference between why you buy and why you stay, right? Again, Train Heroic, we're in a different world. You have to be on this. This is a super easy platform to use. Coach Boyle and I both use it to deliver all of our online training, and some of it starts at $10 a month. Just depends on how many people you have. And they have a free 14-day trial. So, and if you mention that we sent you, we're going to put a 4-week athlete development program into the account, absolutely free, so you can get an idea of, how it's done. So if you're looking for the best online training solution in the game, go to trainheroic.com, take the free 14-day trial. All right, for the certified functional strength coach segment, another new one. Brandon Rarick and Kevin Carr are going to be taking this over, going to be taking turns. Kevin continues his 3-part series on movement as medicine, discussing a wide array of benefits exercise has on physical, emotional, and psychological health. Today he's going to talk about the impact of grip strength and how that can be a predictor of your overall health and wellness. So a lot of the things Kevin's talking about are just things that you want to talk to about with your clients for buy-in, certainly. So, all right, long episode, lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Kevin Carr.
Welcome to the Certified Functional Strength Coach segment. My name is Kevin Carr, and today is part 2 of a 7-part series titled Movement as Medicine, where we discuss the wide array of benefits that exercise has on your physical, emotional, and psychological health. Today, we're going to discuss how your grip strength can be a valuable predictor of your overall health and wellness. While the notion that being strong can improve your lifespan and health span may not be news to longtime advocates of strength training, this is a significant step in the right direction for the traditional medical community. Recently, a number of studies have come out demonstrating that grip strength is a significant predictor of cardiovascular events in patients with type 2 diabetes, of cause-specific mortality in middle-aged and elderly patients, of reduced complications following surgery, and reduced length of stay in hospitalized older patients that have been admitted for rehabilitation. Consider this stunning quote from the PURE study that tracked grip strength in over 150,000 subjects in 17 different countries. Quote, each 11-pound decrease in grip strength over the course of the study was linked to a 16% higher risk of dying of any cause, a 17% higher risk of dying of heart disease, a 9% higher risk of dying of stroke, and a 7% higher risk of dying of heart attack, end quote. That's a pretty amazing link being drawn between grip strength and heart health. And what's even more shocking is that the study concluded, quote, grip strength was a stronger predictor of all-cause and cardiovascular mortality than systolic blood pressure alone, end quote. Whoa. Maybe the next time you go to the doctor for your annual physical, they should also check your grip strength. Now, it's important to realize here, it's not specifically the strength of your hands itself that is the proposed mechanism for improving your long-term health outcomes. It's the fact that grip strength is a signifier of overall health, vitality, and robustness. People who lift weights are generally healthier, more fit, and make better lifestyle choices than those who do not. A natural side effect of participating in weightlifting is an increase in grip strength, especially while using full body exercises like chin-ups, deadlifts, and carries. We know that resistance training helps us to become stronger and more resilient as we age. There's loads of science that demonstrates strength training as an effective intervention to reduce chronic inflammation, blood glucose levels, and blood pressure levels, and improve cognitive health. So think of strength training as your prescription for long-term health. Consume it moderately 3 to 5 times per week, and over the course of your entire life, you'd be surprised how many other prescriptions you probably won't need to be taking.
Hey, this is Adam.
This is Tim.
Welcome to the Trainer Hook Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Oh, yeah.
Last time, Tim and I talked about jobs to be done, or essentially trying to understand the important functional and emotional outcomes that your customers are actually seeking. If you're missing those, you're probably missing the point, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, kind of like going further than that, it's like, trying to understand your athletes through kind of like a customer life cycle lens. And if we take a step back, it's like, think about the reasons that people like do pretty much anything. Like they buy a thing or they sign up for something. It's like, there's some excitement or emotional arousal or FOMO. There's an emotional core. Like that's like an acute thing that they feel like acting on.
Yeah. And that's sales in general, right, Adam? And what we've kind of been talking about up to this point is like understanding your audience, knowing the real jobs to be done or their real desires, going a couple layers deep. It's all there to spark this like emotional epiphany that people are just like, ooh, I need this, or I want this, or I have to have this. And that's, just helped by things like, I don't know, discounts or promos or like, like you said, creating a fear of missing out. But everything we've been talking to up until this point is about that, creating that arousal to make, to allow people to make that decision. But that is not where it ends.
Right. Just like anything else, right? We don't walk around as raw nerves all the time, right? You can't function if everything is a big deal all the time.
Sure.
And so, I mean, just you get some emotional arousal happens, right? And I'll use an example that, personal trainers can relate to, which is you have older people, we're talking 50 plus. They're like, my mom got really sick and I realized, like I'm on the same path.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that it triggers this thing in them and it can lead to long lasting change, but it's not guaranteed. Right. A lot of those people, right, they can be really upset about their weight or, it could be a lot of things. And then most of those people will fail in behavior change, just by the numbers, right? At least once, more than once, probably. Eventually, some people do succeed. But anyway, the point is that like that emotional arousal in any case does fall over time, and you have to rely on something else has to take over. Something else has to motivate them to do the thing and stay on track, right?
Yeah, I think the people who are driven by a desired outcome for their whole life, their whole lives, those people are few and far between, though they are out there. And what I'm talking about is like someone who has a competition coming up or team training, athletic training, where people, these goals are all, they're perpetual. They're always driving progress. But I think the vast majority of people whom our coaches coach at Train Heroic, and I think everywhere, people aren't going to be working on like an Olympic cycle, right? They're not working up for a gold medal over the course of years. They just want to feel something. But that's the point. You have to have the realization as a coach that, right, this is going to happen, right? People's things are going to change in the way their psychology.
Yeah. So the idea is that like, people buy an idea, like they're excited, they have this idea, and then they get an actual experience, which is all the interactions with your training or the product you're selling.
Yeah.
And those experiences make them feel something, and they give them different realizations to some extent. So, there are people who I trained at one point who never really reach their goals. They make some progress and they stall. But like, again, at some point, a few months down the road, after they like thought they really wanted to do this thing, like, I actually just really like working out now. Yeah. Like this service is working for me because I feel better. I sleep better. I am eating better. Like I know I'm healthier. Right. And that's in the end, like maybe the thing they're actually after.
Yeah. Like it's funny you said that, like the perceived like big benefit that people may have, over time, the emotional arousal fades. So they're not like necessarily attached to it, but like, ooh, now I'm sleeping well. Now I understand the importance of good nutrition. Now I can, carry my grandson without back pain. Those things have now become the emotional arousal to drive that person towards a desired outcome.
There's a whole other topic we won't get into now, maybe next time. It was the idea that like these value-based things, like you said, there aren't many people out there who just train. Like there are people who like working out just intrinsically, obviously. It's not like those don't exist. But there are also people who it's like a value-based system of like, I am the kind of person who does this, that kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, so what has to happen is like there's something else, some benefits they realize. And like when we talk to our marketplace athletes, when we do some customer research, people who've been around a while, they're happy with Train Heroic. Yeah. A lot of what they say is I signed up, and again, they cite some emotional arousal or some like marketing. Right. Ooh, I saw the coach. I trusted the coach, like as somebody I followed on social media, and I thought they were pretty cool. So they had this cool offer going, and I decided to try it out. Yeah. Now, what do you actually get out of this? And people are like, well, to be truthful, I didn't know what the app was. I didn't know what a team was. I didn't really know how the community would work. I didn't know how coaching would work in this context, right? Because some of our coaches do actually a fair amount of video feedback and things like that. Yeah. But what they cite are things like a lot of times these are adult buyers, right? The majority of them. And they're like, I have to work. I could write my own programming, but it's just not something I want to do or spend time on. So signed up for something that's pretty solid. It changes a lot. Like I wouldn't write such variable programming. It's entertaining for me. Yeah. Right? That's valuable. There are other people doing it. I'm not on my own. I do have a coach, who's the kind of more loose interaction, but there is one there. But even still, it's just like, it's the sum of all these things add up to being like, this is a solution to a problem that I almost didn't realize I had, which was like, this is like way easier than like putting my own stuff together. I just show up, go hard. It feels good. I'm going to keep going. That's a lot of what it is. So
more than the reps and sets, more than the X's and O's, baby. Create the experience, right?
I think the takeaway here is just that you're selling a sum of experiences, and the reasons people sign up with you naturally are not always the reasons they stick with you.
Totally love it.
That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainhook.com, start a 14-day free trial. We got new pricing in there to suit any kind of coach. Starts as low as $9.99.
Welcome to the Fit to Speak segment. My name is Jenny Rurick, and today we're going to talk about virtual communication and what you can do to make it a great experience for the people on the other end of the camera. When people join you on a virtual call, whether that is a business-related call or coaching, they are making a judgment about you in the first 1 to 2 minutes. In that 1 to 2 minutes, it's unlikely that you've gotten into any depth of content. So what are they judging you on? They are judging you on your presence, which is made up of the environment that you're communicating from, the context of the situation, the vocal elements of your communication, which include volume, tone, and the pace at which you speak, and then also your body language, how you manage your eye contact. Do they see you gesturing and what your posture looks like? You want that first impression to go positively. So I'm here to give you 7 tips or tactics that I'd encourage you to start using immediately to make sure that you have more effective virtual communication or interactions with your clients and people that you work with in business. First, make sure to turn your camera on. Do not remove the only human element of communication by keeping your camera off. When people see us, that is what releases oxytocin, and that's the bonding hormone. When that bonding hormone is released, that's when we begin to build rapport with people, which is a key ingredient in effective communication. Second, position the camera at eye level. Not only because it's the most flattering angle for everybody, but it also makes people on the other end of the camera feel as though we're having a face-to-face conversation. Yes, of course, they know you are communicating virtually, but the more that you can do to mimic the same context that they would experience in person, the better. So position your camera at eye level. You can do that by buying a laptop stand, putting your laptop up on a set of books, whatever you need to do. The third tactic, lighting. Be sure that the lighting that you have in your space is shining on you from the front and it is not coming from behind you. This might seem obvious, but I would say that at least 50% of the people that I interact with virtually are too dark. They're either sitting with a bright window behind them or they're in a room that has dim yellowish lights. With our business environment being predominantly virtual, you need to spend $20 on Amazon and buy some lighting. You can position a lamp behind or next to your laptop and shine it on you. You want people to be able to see your facial details and the effect that goes on your face as you're communicating with them. The fourth tactic, sit back away from your camera so that as you speak, not only can they see the effect on your face, they can also see your gestures. When you gesture, get your hands up around your shoulder level and let them do whatever they want to do, but you need them there to complement your words. If we gesture and they are animated and the people on the other end of the camera can see them, we will come across as more confident and in command, and it will create a more engaging experience for the people who are listening to us. The fifth tactic, look at and speak directly into the camera lens at certain points. The people that we're speaking to are on the other end of the camera. If you want your communication to feel personal to them, you need to find moments to pause, move your eye contact directly into the camera lens, and share a thought or a sentence. I try and do this at least 40 to 50% of the time in any and all of my virtual communications. I want people on the other end of the camera to feel like I'm looking and speaking to them. Tactic number 6, when you are coaching groups in a virtual environment, before delivering praise or a cue, be sure to say their name so that you can get their attention. Otherwise, it's going to be wasted breath. We need to have somebody's attention before they're listening to us. That would sound like, John, great job. Your form is perfect on those push-ups, and not the other way around. And the 7th tactic is to save a couple of minutes at the beginning of your session or meeting with somebody or a group, or at the end for small talk. In virtual communication, we tend to feel rushed and that we are wasting people's time if we're chit-chatting with them before or after we get to business. That's not true, because think about all of your in-person interactions with people. It begins and or ends with small talk, because we know that's how we build rapport and relationships. Do not remove that from your virtual communication. It is even more important virtually. Spend the first 1 or 2 minutes asking how their day was, talking about something unrelated to what's going to happen. Get to business. And then again, if you can find a few minutes at the end to have a little bit more small talk, ask them what their weekend is up to, do that. It's a great way to sustain and build relationships and rapport. That's what I have for you today. If you liked what you heard and you want access to a PDF that details these tactics for virtual communication, visit my website, which is Fit to Speak, www.fit-to-speak.com. On the website, you can also get more information about one-on-one coaching and upcoming online courses and live events.
All right, guys, right now, don't forget at Perform Better, it's the holiday sale, 40% off on select items, over 100 items on sale. This is one of their biggest sales of the year. Also, Cyber Monday should be getting some different things. They have free shipping for Black Friday, so there's going to be something for that, so make sure you check in on that. Don't forget, pro tip, if you don't see something, call them. They are super helpful, and they can tell you when things are coming back in stock. Check it out at performbetter.com. All right, now it's time for the strengthcoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle, strengthcoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try it out for 30 days. 30 days, just $1. You have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day answering questions. Check it out at strengthcoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? Trying to get my new computer set up. So if you get some, if you hear some phone calls jingling in, we'll know that's on. We're trying to transfer some stuff over here. So I apologize if we get a couple of little.
There we go.
Like that, yeah.
Right on
I don't
cue.
know what's going on, but it's happening.
All right. Coach, this is episode 300, which it's really not. It's really 351 or 52, but we don't count, just in not counting the special episodes, officially 300.
The B's and the specials. And
Yeah, exactly. And, we've been doing this for 13 years. This podcast, coincided with probably 2 months later. It took me about 2 months to get everything kind of together. You started strengthcoach.com in 2007, September of 2007. This was towards the end of October, I think October 24th, but 13 years now. We are. So we're going to do this with everybody today with the Shawns and Brijesh. And, we're just trying to kind of reconnect with the original guys that were on, and hopefully Sarah Cahill. I'm still waiting to schedule her. But wanted just to kind of go over, look back the last 13 years. I know we do this. You do this all the time anyway. Like, you always look back and talk about some of the things you've learned. But let's start with that. 13 years now, 2007. I think you were, obviously at MBSC. We're at BU. This was really a new thing for you. So over the last 13 years, what were the 3 biggest things that really stand out for you?
Well, it's pretty interesting, because when you sent this email out, I had to actually sit down and think. I said, okay, usually I can rip off a bullshit answer to just about anything and turn it into a 20-minute lecture, but I had to really think about this. And things, I think the biggest thing that I learned, in all honesty, number one, I would say would be to slow down. Because I think I was going, at such a frantic pace that, it wasn't good for me health-wise. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good. The only thing it was good for was work. Business was good. Lots of opportunities, lots of stuff going on, but I had to learn to just sort of toss the brakes on a little bit. And that kind of led me into the second part. And you've seen my Success Secrets talk at Perform Better a couple of years ago, but slowing down and enjoying sort of family time more and all that stuff got me to the point of realizing that, rings don't matter. Because I think for a while, there's a lot of, I think, self-gratification. I want to be involved in a championship. I want a national championship ring or whatever it is, a World Series ring. And then when you get all that stuff, you kind of get that like, well, okay, I got it, that great. But you realize, I've jokingly at every time I've done that talk, but I will guarantee you that no one has ever come into my house and said, "Can I see your World Series ring?" My World Series ring has sat since 2013 in a box, in a drawer, and no one has really seen it, looked at it, put it on. So I think you want to be doing something that you're really enjoying and something that's giving you a lot of gratification above and beyond, these sort of extra, might make a difference. And then the last thing, and this I talked about in that same Success Secrets talk, is that investing works. And that suddenly when you do start to get older, like you said, someone like me look and think, oh, what, the last 13, whatever it's been, money doubles in 7 years at about 7%. That's kind of that rule of sevens thing. And when I realized now, okay, I have basically 4 times more money than I did when we started doing this podcast, because I've been smart about investing and saving. And you realize, I always say to people, if you've got $200,000 saved in 2007, suddenly in 2013, you've got $400,000, and then, you're close to $1 million, $800,000 by that 2020 point that we're at right now. So I think people need to think about that stuff, because when it's small amounts, when you're putting away, whatever, $10 out of every paycheck, or $10 a week, or 10% of your income, or whatever it is, you think this is never going to add up. And then when you get towards the end, you start thinking, holy crap, this really works. So I think those were the biggest things for me.
Yeah, Mike, let's expand on kind of number 2 in terms of the ring, and I'll give you an example before. Like when I wrote, like when you come out with a book, for example, you get excited. You're like, I just want, I'm gonna have a book too. Like you had a book, so I never really always wanted a book, but then as I started to advance in my career, I started to think about it, and then this book kind of came out of nowhere, and it didn't do, like, obviously didn't sell nearly what you would sell. It sold, I don't even know what the number is, to be honest with you, but I stopped at one point when I got I was getting so much great feedback, and I did a couple of mastermind talks for people, and people will send me stuff and say, thank you so much for that. And I read your book and I'm doing blah, blah, blah. That's where I was like, oh my God, this is the awesome part. It really is. And like when you're getting that feedback, for me, that's a huge piece of it. It's why I sold my gym and wanted to focus on some of this stuff, because so many people were like, the podcast has helped me so much. Strength Coach TV has helped me so much. StrengthCoach.com has helped me so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I really started to realize that's what I love to hear, that I love to be part of somebody's growth process. For you, if it's not the rings, and from the gym, from the coach's perspective, what is it? Is it just seeing the development? Is it seeing kids get drafted? Is it seeing them get to college? Is it seeing them becoming healthy adults? For you, what do you feel like? What is it that makes you feel that's much better than the rings?
Well, I think it's kind of, all of the above. Because it's all those things. It's all the little things adding up into one big thing. And it's just realizing that it's sort of, they always talk about, like, all business is local, all politics is local. And it's, like, does it matter, that I'm a big deal in Turkey? You know what I mean? It's like, And I'm like you, like I love the fact that my book has been translated into all these languages. I think it's really, really cool. I think it's cool when I get somebody, from Turkey or somebody from Hungary or someplace that says, hey, I read your book and it was great. They're all little pieces of the puzzle, I realize. And probably as I get older, just like being around my kids and seeing Kevin and Brendan writing their own books, it's like watching your kids grow up. It's all part of the process. And I guess what you realize, it's kind of like you with the podcast and then Strength Coach TV and then writing your own book. You realize there's always going to be something next. Nothing is going to be the be all end all. You're not going to hit a point and think, oh, I got my World Series ring. Everything's right with the world. I can just sit back now and put my feet up and I'm done. And so I guess that's more the point, is that there's always going to be something else. There's always going to be somebody else to help. There's always going to be somebody else life that you can improve. There's, and I think over time, the kind of the whys and the hows morph a little bit, but in another sense, they probably don't. I mean, it's so great for me. Like you talk about, whether it's Sean Hayes or Sean Skahan or Brijesh, or these are all people that were interns who are now really established strength and conditioning coaches in their own right. And so there's just, it's almost like you get a constant stream of these little bits of approval that really make a difference.
Yeah, it's so cool. And it's funny because it's kind of like investing, because in the beginning it doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden you're getting, like even with Kevin and Brendan, for me, they used to say, oh, we listen to the podcast all the time early on in their career. Oh my God, we can't do without the podcast, whatever. And you feel good when as you get older and the more it's like investing. It's like the rule of 7. Like it seems like those people reaching out have doubled over that time. So it is pretty cool.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's exactly what it's like, in terms of you're building this massive account of goodwill with people. And it's coming from a whole bunch of different places. It's almost like, yeah, well, for you, I invested in the podcast, and then I invested in the Strength Coach TV, and then I invested in my book, and then I invested in, the people in my gym, and then I and all of those are paying these little dividends to you as you go along, but eventually you kind of get closer. I mean, I'm closer to the end from a professional standpoint. I don't want to I don't want to look at it that way from a life standpoint, but from a professional standpoint, I'm starting to get to like where, the Al Vermeils and these guys were, where you're thinking, okay, pretty soon, maybe I'll just show up at a couple of Perform Better events and give a couple talks and have a couple beers, but it's not going to be the be all end all for me anymore. And there'll be people going, who's that old guy? What does he do? but you'll there'll be a lot of people actually there that you did influence and that your work helped. So I guess for me, it's just realizing that it's really more of a conglomeration of a lot of little things than one big thing.
Yeah. I think also you have to keep your eye, or, like one eye open towards the fact that there will be people that you'll never get credit for as well. Because, I mean, for example, people will say, hey, Mike, they'll send me an email. Mike, I love the podcast. I'm like, Mike has nothing to do with this podcast. I put the guy on the map, for Christ's sake, And no, so, but you do. There is an element of that, like if you're doing it for the credit, don't do it. It's like Mark Verstegen once said, if you're going to open a facility for money, don't do it. So, but I really feel like that's an element of it too, and that's where the why comes in. It's like if you remember why you're doing it, you'll keep moving. So.
Yeah, and I think it's, I always say the goal of the coach is to eliminate the coach. Like I always look at it and think, as much I've been giving Brendan a hard time about his book, because his book for me is like this echo chamber where I hear myself. And Dan John probably feels the exact same way, where he's probably thinking, what do you mean, Mike stuff? It's all my stuff. But the reality is now at some point it's going to be Brendan's stuff, and the next generation is guys like Kevin and Brendan who are doing what we did when we were young. They're in their early 30s and they're writing a book and they're speaking, and knowing that you've sort of correctly bred and taught this next generation is a really nice feeling. It's a very kind of comforting feeling because I don't, like I said, I want to be obsolete. I want to get to the point where people think CFSC is the best certification that there is out there and not Mike Boyle, just CFSC, like the information that's there. And then someone will be like, well, that's all Mike Boyle's information, and other people go, no, it's not. Kevin and Brendan, they've been teaching this thing forever.
Yeah.
And, and that will be the reality. And what I don't want to be, and I won't mention any names, but, 4-letter names. I don't want to be that bitter old guy who's mad that, I'm not getting any credit and everybody stole my stuff. I want to be that not bitter old guy who's really smiling and proud and looking at everything and going like, wow, this is really cool. We kind of go, we were in on the ground floor of all this.
Yeah. Before, it reminded me of one time I had this young kid and he was really into music and I'm really into music. So, it was at least 10 years ago, and it might have been 14 or 15. And I had, we were playing some music and he really loved, music and John Mayer, and I played him. I said, let me play him some Stevie Ray Vaughan. So I played, I go, you gotta listen to this guy. He's unbelievable. I play him Stevie Ray Vaughan and he looks at me, he goes, he's good, but he's such a John Mayer ripoff. I was like, dude, John Mayer has a Stevie Ray Vaughan tattoo on his left arm, all right? So settle down here, but it's a similar idea. Right?
I mean, that's the reality of the situation, is that we're all very replaceable and that the next generation is well on its way. Absolutely.
And I love this quote by Ray Edwards, and this will resonate in a similar way. He said, there's people out there that can only hear your voice. So that A, should inspire you to create. And number 2 is remember, okay, Mike Boyle said that, but maybe you can say it in a different way and capture something else that Mike might not have, and it had nothing to do with you or me, just had to do with that person and that time. So it's one reason why we all should keep creating. As you said in my book, you just encourage everybody to write and speak all the time, because that's where, the more you do that, the more you get your word out there and the more you'll kind of connect with people, and the bigger your message will the bigger audience that you'll reach. So,
right. Well, it's funny. Like, think about your book. Like, people after a while would be like, okay, this success thing is pretty easy. Like, a lot of these stories are similar. Geez, get up in the morning, have a routine. It's like, you start looking and thinking, I mean, that's the beauty of the whole thing. And it's even, like you said, the beauty of Brendan's book is that he put things, like you said, in a different voice. He put things maybe in a different order. He put things, his stories are different than my stories because his stories came from listening to my stories. And so it's literally, I guess, in some ways, like, you think about Indian, folklore and things that are passed down through the generations. Things are passed down through stories. And I told a lot of these stories to our staff when Kevin and Brendan were there and were listening, and they listened to the stories, and then they take that story and they retell it again with maybe a slightly different slant on it. But that it's almost like a written version of an oral history.
Good point. I like that. Coach, I'm not going to let everybody, no one's going to get away with this one. I'm not going to let them out of this question in terms of, a lot of people will answer, well, I wouldn't change anything because I learned from my mistakes, blah, blah, blah. Give me a do-over. Is there something that you feel like, if I had to do it over again, I would do it. I might have done it this way.
It's funny because I had my first reaction was exactly the one that you described. In terms of, I don't think I'd change anything. But then I said, no, that's cheating. So if you really said, the do-over for me would have been, I probably wouldn't have moved to California. I probably wouldn't have kind of sold out of MBSC when I did. I probably would have hung in. I would have, if I had to do over, I would have stood my ground a little bit more. I think what I did is I got frustrated in a work situation, a partnership that wasn't working. And I just kind of took the easy way out. I went with Mark Verstegen, and at that time Athletes Performance, and took a job in California. And let my former partners run the business for, I think, what was about 5 years. And now if I look at it, he said, if I could do it over, I'd do that part over, because I think I'd be 5 years further ahead right now than I was. And I think I've done okay anyway, but I did feel like I might have in some ways wasted some time during that time period, at least in terms of building the business and building towards retirement. Because what you realize is at some point, you're going to look at this and think, I don't want to work this hard the rest of my life. I'd like to have enough money where I can comfortably think I don't need to work. And I think that should be everybody's goal. Everybody always, I want to work forever, blah, blah, blah. Trust me, you're not going to want to work forever. You're going to get old and you're going to get tired.
Get tired.
And I mean, that's why the world works the way that it does. And so for me, I probably would have not made that mistake at that time.
Yeah, good stuff. And again, going back to your success talk, I think this next question is really, we've heard a lot of the, different, for the most part, you stay on brand with this and have a lot of the same answers. And I think anybody that knows you will know some variation of this one. But, you got to tell, you talk to them all the time. You talk to your interns. And if you're only going to tell them one more time, next Tuesday at the last meeting, what's one or two things you're going to tell all those up-and-coming strength coaches? What are the things that this is what you need to do to be successful in this profession?
And again, I wrote this answer down. I would tell them, think about what you really want, because I don't know if people do. I've gotten my sort of standard response now. Whenever people call and ask me questions, I make them read Brian Tracy's goals before I talk to them. I said, because I really want you to write your goals down. I want you to see, where do you want to be next year? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And it's similar to the course I went to with you, same idea. But I think people haven't thought through what the end game is. And as a result, they maybe waste some time. So if I could give somebody some advice, it would be figure it out, or, as soon as you can. Do I want, I say to people, do I want, 5 kids and a white picket fence and, a house, with a big yard? Or do I want to, be in the NFL? Or what do I want? Like, what's really going to be important to me? And that may change, but I think at least you'll have a better chance. If I always use the map analogy, it's very difficult to get somewhere if you don't have a destination.
Yeah.
So, I think try to figure out, at least get a little bit of a move when you come right out of the gate.
And you just said it too. It's going to change, people. I've been trying to really focus on this the last few years, goals and mission, and I've been on a mission to talk about the mission. And I'm listening to Sir Ken Robinson's Finding Your Element. I listen to Michael Gervais and Pete Carroll's Compete to Create. That's all. Pete and Michael take you through finding your mission statement, finding your vision. I just got Donald Miller's program from Business Made Simple called it's the same idea. It's about goals, but the first thing you're doing is you have to find that mission, that purpose, and that passion. Like, where is it? Where do they intersect? Where you can make money? So you really, if you talk to anybody that's successful, honestly, that's really where so many people are talking about that now, is really got to focus on, know where you're going, know the why, and then everything kind of falls into place. So,
but also know, like, you're still listening to your 50, what?
3,
and you're still doing it. I'm 61, and you know what I mean? And I'm still figuring it out. You have to realize that it is going to change and that it is a bit of a moving target, but that at least, try to get a sense. And maybe it's, go out and sample, do an internship in the pros, do an internship in the private sector, figure out what really makes your day. Like, is it that being in the pro sports environment, or is it seeing the life-changing effect you can have on somebody in a general fitness setting? I can remember thinking the last thing I wanted to do was work with normal people.
Yeah. And
I really like normal people now. And behind normal people was kids. The really last thing I ever want to do is coach kids. And I'm having a blast, because I look at it and think, I really am. When you think, I always say to our staff, we're in the life-changing business. I'm really in the life-changing business when I'm with these kids that I've had now since they were 12, 12, 13, 14, 15. I mean, we're making a really big difference in these kids. And you just got to figure out of all that stuff, like, what is it? What's gonna really float your boat at the end?
I think we can use the analogy for that. It's the same as your recommendation for young athletes. Try every sport. Go play soccer and baseball, or as a parent, get them involved in all the different sports. Keep them playing, and they're going to find something that they're good at and that they like. And usually whatever they're good at, they're going to like, and they're going to pick that sport. And then when they're 13 or 14, okay, you can focus on that now. But I think, that idea about being a generalist, getting all these different ways in first, kind of similar to your article about, the chef, right? And the cook and like, are you a sous chef? Are you a chef? Are you, no, first you have to get all those recipes and try them out. And then it's okay to copy those recipes, but you can't be a chef until you've learned those other recipes. So I think it's similar, both of those analogies to kind of that advice.
Absolutely. I think that's the real key, right?
Yep. All right, Coach, we'll let you go. It's been great. 13 years we've been doing this. The podcast is still going strong. I have no intention of stopping it, even if you're not around. I'm going to keep going. But
I think I'm hoping to be around for a while. So
yeah, even if you retire, we're still going to have these calls. So
yeah, this is pretty easy not to retire from. So
yeah,
I'm laying in my bed right now. So
yeah, we can always call it the Retired Strength Coach Podcast or something, or something like that. So all right, Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll have a nice Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Ant.
All right, well, so this is very fitting. My first guest on this special kind of episode we're doing today is Shawn Skahan. And Shawn was actually the first guest we ever had in 2007, coming off of a Stanley Cup win with the Anaheim Ducks. He was a strength and conditioning coach there. And so he's with the Minnesota Wild right now. So Shawn, thanks for doing this. This is exciting.
Hey, thanks, Ant. I really appreciate this opportunity, and congratulations on 300. And I can't believe it's been 13 years.
I know, it is crazy. And now, I just told everybody you've been with the Wild. You're with the Wild now. Talk to us about, like, just from the last time we spoke. You were with the Ducks for about 5 years at the time when you got on. You just won the Stanley Cup. What did you do since then, for the most part, in a nutshell?
That episode was 2007, and I was with the Ducks until the summer of 2015, and I then relocated to Boston, my hometown, where I worked with Boston University for a year with their men's ice hockey team. And then I was offered an opportunity to come back to pro hockey, to the Minnesota Wild, and I've been here since 2016.
Very cool. Well, I want to just jump. We weren't going to talk about this specifically, but maybe you will within, the first thing I'm going to ask is what you've learned, 3 things maybe you've learned over those last 13 years. But let me ask you something, because I know you had ties to Minnesota with your wife and with school, et cetera. So would you have, like, for example, let's say it was St. Louis, no ties, no anything. Do you think you would have went back to the NHL?
I don't know. I don't know that answer, because it was a really good situation in Boston. However, I wanted to give it another kick at the can with good people, and I knew there was good people with the Minnesota Wild organization that I've known from past experiences, and I knew I'd be given autonomy to do my job. Feel I was in a toxic environment. I'll say that as nicely as I can. But I was looking forward to that opportunity to go in to work with a new group that, was looking to improve their organization. And it was an exciting opportunity at the time. It still is.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, I certainly from my book Be Like the Best, where relationships came up so much. And I remember talking to you around that time, and just, I know Bruce Boudreau was the head coach, and that the relationships that you developed over all those years kind of kept you, or really brought you to Minnesota. Just another example of how important it is to really cultivate and develop all of those, really good relationships with people.
Yeah, I think that's important because those happen over time. For example, the general manager of the Wild was Chuck Fletcher at the time, and Chuck is now the general manager of the Philadelphia Flyers. Well, Chuck and I worked together with the Ducks back in 2002. I believe he was the general manager for the Cincinnati Mighty Ducks. He was our minor league general manager. He's also our kind of assistant general manager. And, I think the world of Chuck, and I've always got along with him. And, obviously, me coming back to Minnesota he was a big part of that as well. So I think relationships are huge in any business, and to be able to facilitate those and, keep them strong is important.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good segue into really the first topic of like three really big takeaways. You've had an interesting journey over the last 13 years. What are three things you'd say you've really kind of taken away, you've learned over those last 13 years?
Wow. So 2007, the Anaheim Ducks just won the Stanley Cup, and 2003 the team was in the Stanley Cup Finals and unfortunately lost in Game 7 to the New Jersey Devils. But I think what I realized over the last 13 years, it's hard to get back there. It's extremely difficult to get back there, because you realize that there's 31, soon to be 32 teams in the National Hockey League that are all trying to do the same thing. Let's hold that Stanley Cup up over their head at the end of the Stanley Cup Finals. And, at that time, probably, I was like, oh, this is a Stanley Cup Finals in 4 seasons I've been here. I've been to the Western Conference Finals 3 times at that point. It's hard to get back there. And, I think the strength and conditioning coach is a support staff member, and there are a lot of things that are, beyond your control. It's talent, it's injuries, it's coaching, it's, transactions, whatever. And all those things have to be just going the right way at the right time for a championship to happen, I think, in any sport. So that's one thing I've learned. I think from a strength and conditioning perspective, what I think I've learned is like there's so much information out there in the field. And for me, I think it's okay to be a good filterer, if that's a word, like to take and use what you think is applicable to your program and your situation. And I think I've always done a good job at that. As long as I feel good about what I'm doing with my athletes, I don't have to, believe me, I love to learn. I love to continue my education. I'm always learning still, but I think I've become a good filterer, a person who just absorbs, what is useful and apply it to our program while keeping our program pretty simple. I think that's what I've been good at, and I'm still able to learn stuff that, our athletes are always training elsewhere in the off season, and you have to be up to speed on what they might be learning from their trainers. I think is healthy. I think it's great. I've learned quite a bit from my athletes and what their trainers have been doing with them in the off seasons. I think, I've become better at filtering information and kind of like doing things at a really basic level. And I think that's okay, because even though it's the highest level of sport in the world.
Yeah, you know what, Sean? It's interesting because I think, and you and I have actually talked about this before over the years. Is a lot of coaches or trainers, they chase the certifications or some of the new stuff that's out there. I think Brett Jones, I think you and I were even talking about Brett Jones one time. Brett Jones was like, he wasn't going to any of these new stuff where with corrective exercise or whatever, because he was working with FMS and he just felt like I don't even fully understand. And he's an expert on that, what I'm supposed to be doing right now and here and the simple stuff. And I don't want to chase all the, because we really saw an influx of courses and certifications really over the last 5 or 6 years. So I think we see a lot of people chasing those letters.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to learn new things and new ideas, but in terms of like how if you try to use anything you've learned and put it into your program, you'd be working training for 3 to 4 hours a day. So I think that it becomes like, okay, how do you learn the information and apply it to your situation? For me, I might only get 50 minutes a day with our guys during the season. And so like you have to be able to filter and put things in where you feel are appropriate.
Absolutely. Did you say 15 minutes? 5?
Yeah, I might have 15 minutes with our players.
Yeah.
On a practice day.
Yeah.
Or some days I might have an hour. Some days I might have 10 minutes after a game because we got to get on a plane and go to Nashville, something like that. So I have to be able to find ways to put the information in and use it in your situation as best as you can.
Absolutely. Very cool. Anything else over those last 13 years that you really felt like, that was a huge takeaway?
Yeah, I think I've gotten better at learning to control what I can control and not really worry about things that I don't have to worry about. I think I've gotten better at that, and just worrying about the things, not worrying, I should say, more focusing on the things that I can control, and I think I've gotten better at that.
Absolutely. Yeah, a really important thing. Something that really was talked about over the last 8 months, especially with COVID. Like, look, you know what?
Yeah.
You got to control what you can control. There's a lot out of our control right now. So, Sean, and I'm not going to give anybody a pass on this next question where a lot of people are like, well, I wouldn't do anything over. I don't regret anything. It's all learning. But, we all have some stuff we kind of wouldn't mind, as a do-over. Is there anything over the last 13 years you feel like, I probably should have done this, or I probably wouldn't have, if I had to do it all over again, I might not have gone this way or that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think there were times that my job, the most important aspect of my life, unfortunately, and when you realize that it's important to have a job and it's important to work hard at your job, but when other things in your life take a hit, and I'm being very transparent and admitting that, unfortunately, some parts of my life have suffered. And I think, I wish I could go back and do that over. And, just when you take a global perspective, look at things, and, I think I sucked up into that a little bit, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it can be hard. Like you said, well, when you're in the job or when you're doing something and you're progressing and you want to stay in it, especially sometimes like a volatile job like you guys, like I think, in that industry there, you can get fired pretty easily. A new GM comes in, they want their people, a new coach comes in, whatever it may be. So sometimes you just put your nose down, you feel like you got to do extra stuff, and then relationships can really take a hit. All kinds of relationships, family and kids and wife and parents and whatever, so it could be a tough thing. So yeah, I mean, those are some good lessons. What would be your advice, like you got to talk to somebody about, look, you want to be successful as a strength and conditioning coach, not so much NHL, but strength and conditioning coach in general. What's the advice you're going to give them?
I think, be yourself. Be yourself. Learn from others. Don't try to be other people. You don't know what situation they're in or what they have going on in their profession or their lives. Just be yourself. And, I think that kind of segues into being happy with where you're at. I think it's important to kind of, do a good job, grind, and where it takes to be successful at where you're at. And then, don't be, a lot of people are still looking ahead to the next great thing. I should get this opportunity, that one. And, I just don't get caught up in that stuff. Just do a good job where you're at and work on those relationships and be a good person, be a good strength coach. I think that's, I think it was the book by Frosty Weatherling, the Be the Big Time Where You're At. I think that's a good book. I think just being content to where you're at, but also always try to get better, always try to learn, improve, but be happy with where you're at.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember doing my core values a while back for the business for 5-Iron. And one thing that I've always said, and I used to teach this when I was in the bar business, because I used to have these young managers that would come in and they would have to trail me for 2 weeks. I was working for this corporation. And, we had bartenders. We had these, most were female, and they would make so much money a night. They'd make $500 a night and work 3 nights a week. And meanwhile, I got these assistant managers doing 50 hours a week, and they're making $38,000 a year to start. And I said, look, don't look at the bartenders. Don't think about their tips. They're in a job where if it rains, maybe they didn't make a lot of money. If the hotel's closed, they're not going to make money. You have a job, you have insurance, you have a career path. So you have to run your own race. That was always my big analogy, run your own race. And I feel like it's the same thing, like you said, especially when you start to get into a situation like where you're in and people are getting certain opportunities and you've been doing this for X amount and they're getting that. You just got to run your own race and keep your head down and keep working hard.
Yeah, 100% agree there. It's just, run your own race. I really like that one. And yeah, that's the best you can do.
Shawn, well, I really appreciate you coming on. We got a bunch of you coming on today. It's been an interesting 13 years. Obviously, you and I still talk all the time, so it's been great for me to be able to like you said, it's hard to get there with the Stanley Cup. I remember I was at that game 7. I was there for the Devils when they won that game, and it was an interesting time, but it took me another 12 years to go back to a Stanley Cup game as a spectator. So, and neither one's my favorite team either, by the way. I'm an Islander fan. That was the Devils and the Rangers. So, I'm still waiting for my Islander Stanley Cup. But, Shawn, in all seriousness, thanks so much for coming on and kind of going over the last 13 years, some of the lessons. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure. And congratulations again. And continue doing what you're doing. I appreciate it.
All right, so now we have our second addition to today's special episode. And actually, it was the second episode, Shawn Windle. And Shawn was actually, believe it or not, hard to believe, was with the Indiana Pacers way back then. And he still is. It's kind of crazy. He's the only one that we have right now. It's still with the same organization. That says a lot. Shawn, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, I'm so happy that you're still going strong, and I can't believe it's been this long. And, so when you reached out, I know I don't normally do podcasts or really much of anything, but I couldn't refuse you when you reached out to me.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, like I said, kidding around. I mean, you've been with the Pacers since the summer of 2005. And obviously, that's a real long time to be with a professional team at the mercy of whether that's a new coaching change or general manager change. So let's talk about the role from back then to now. Is it similar? Are you doing different things? What are you doing now?
It looks almost entirely different than where I started. I was just the only strength coach wearing the hat of nutrition and every facet that in the strength and conditioning manual that you can possibly wear, all of those hats, just like we all did, if you're old enough, that we all did before teams started hiring nutritionists and psychologists and chefs, on and on and on. But the whole evolution of what we do, and especially at professional sport, you start to add pieces in. Sports science became a big topic in the NBA as well as many other sports. So I've kind of evolved, and my new title is Director of Sport Performance. So we've had a consulting nutritionist for the last few years. We just hired our first full-time nutritionist. I have a data analytics intern under me. I had a nutrition intern under me. I now have 2 assistant strength coaches. I have a strength coach for our G League team. And so I kind of just try to guide each one of those areas and figure out what the rate limiting factor for each player is. And a lot of the technology and I'm not going to say that I'm a data analyst, but I'm in data every day and just trying to figure out what is best for an individual player and the team for that day and the next day and going forward, and understanding that things change very quickly. It could change tomorrow, whether it be an injury for somebody. So then that individual's plan changes, the guy behind him, his plan changes. So we're trying to figure out rate limiting factors, making guys' days as efficient as possible. So I don't do a lot of the hands-on strength and conditioning anymore. It's more of assisting my assistants in how they can be better prepared to provide services for our players. So you're still kind of wearing a lot of hats, but less of a daily coaching role. But I still do, some of the so-called higher level rehabs. Those I am involved with.
Yeah, very cool. It's almost, and obviously it is a business, but it's like a small business or even a gym, or where you want to move away from working in the business and you want to work on the business, where now you're like, like you said, you're overseeing things. You're still obviously involved in all that stuff. So are you still traveling too?
I travel to about 50% of our road games. So it leaves me, so when I don't travel, the goal is to have some uninterrupted time to focus on bigger picture topics, direction of the program, direction of programming, going through all of our testing data, game data. I'm sure you can imagine that there's just so much data now. I mean, you could buy a simple rack now, and I'm shocked that racks don't even have sensors available on them yet. But everything has a piece of technology. That doesn't mean it's a good thing, but sometimes you have to figure out, is this going to make our day easier? Is it going to fill a gap? Are we going to learn something that we didn't know before? And so when I don't travel, that's kind of the goal, and identifying other areas that, whether it's technology or whatever it might be, trying to just grow the program, so to speak.
Love it. Yeah. So let's get right into, really, again, the last 13 years or just even more. You've been with the Pacers for so long. What would you say are the big rocks, the two or three or four big things that you've learned over the last 13 years?
Wow. It's the way I look at this question isn't so much of what I've learned. There's certainly plenty of things that I have learned. It's what I've been able to refine, how I've been able to reframe some things that maybe I looked at differently, 13 years ago, and how I look at it now. Some of that comes from just wisdom or knowledge, longevity at one place, better support services, on and on and on. But I think a lot of it for me it isn't a change in programming or a change in the way I view plyometrics or something like that. One of the biggest things is just stop consuming endless information. The information keeps coming at us, whether it's the latest book, the latest research article, tweet, whatever it is. For me, I have to step away from that and not get caught up, that fear of missing out. Like, I'm falling behind in knowledge. This guy's really smart. He's smarter than I am. And what I try to do now is focus on one kind of area, really, really digest it before you roll it out, and then try to roll it out and hit the target with it before adding too much more. I think that, I think we all do this, but I know that I would get consumed with what can we add? What can we add? And you look at people's programs on when they're putting stuff on social media or wherever it may be. And it's like, man, do they have 2 hours to train this athlete? I mean, all that stuff is good, but like, what are we really going to hit the bullseye on? What are the 2 or 3 biggest things, like you just said, the biggest rocks? Let's put our time there and refine that, because we can learn more about the body but a lot of times we forget about the simple things, those foundational blocks, and we have to master those in the weight room, wherever it is, conditioning. So that's one area that I've gotten better at. I can't say that I've completely given up on, reading and being interested in learning something new, but I can slow myself down better now.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have with the staff now, you have a lot, you can consume a lot of information coming from them. Like, hey, I went to this course, or I went to that course, or hey, what about this? That's also coming in that you have to kind of vet as well, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because we're all really on information overload. And kind of my teacher in that was, I'm giving interns really high level stuff, like something I just read and I think is really interesting. And then I realized that went completely over their head because they haven't consumed the information that I have over my career. And that's fine, but it's a great reminder of the basics are still, we need them. Athletes need them. We can't ignore them. So I'm doing a better job. I'd say the second area, again, it's not like programming or something. It's protecting my time, trying to find some sort of work-life balance. And I know every strength coach, personal trainer, they all go through this. You love what you do. You're willing to invest the time. You want to stay up reading late at night. You want to have an argument on social media. You want to put out a product, whatever it may be. You answer the random phone call to give somebody career advice, but your time is valuable. We're all extremely busy with what we do. I mentioned I don't really do podcasts or speaking, and I don't enjoy that stuff. So maybe it's just easy for me to say I'm protecting my time, but in some ways it's really more about all of those things require preparation, require blocking out time. And my personal life, my personal time is it's important because you don't get a lot of it. My oldest son is now headed off to college next year. And, it's one of those things as parents realize like how quickly time goes. So protect it. So that would be my second big rock.
I love, it's funny. We're getting through lines here. So the other coach is like Shawn Skahan. I think he went in this order as well. Same too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And but look, it's what happens. And when we're younger, I think I love the quote, something about success, where success is saying no to 1,000 opportunities, right?
Yeah.
You have to learn to say no to some things. Like you said, sometimes it's easy because maybe you don't like speaking, maybe, but going back to what Coach Boyle had said earlier in the show is he talked about one of the advice was, know your mission, know the why, know where you're going, because it does answer a lot of questions. If you're not looking to have a coaching business on the side, or maybe you don't need to speak. I don't know what, speaking isn't always the be all end all if it doesn't have an end game to it. So there's a way that you can structure this to make sure you're like, look, no, I would like to do that. I'd like to be quote unquote famous in this industry or help people, but it's going to take too much time. So yeah, it's funny how the through lines come through with, especially with the pro guys.
Yeah, and that's not to say anybody that's giving up their time to do these things is wrong. It's just, for me, I realized that I need a better work-life balance. and just, I have to draw a line in the sand. So
Absolutely.
It's something I've learned, because sometimes it's really difficult to say no to certain people or certain things that are certain opportunities. And you realize just the time involved with it. Where's it going to come from? It's going to come from the time that I'm at home. And it's usually not worth it to me.
Yeah, you can't see your son play music, right? I mean, those are big, those are important things. So,
yeah.
So what about, you got one more for that or?
Yeah.
Okay,
And, I think here's a question that I get a lot, and talking to Brijesh today, which was funny that you mentioned that he was going to be on as well, because we never discussed this, and we text a fair amount, kind of throughout the year, not consistently, but we actually got on the phone today for the first time in quite a while.
So funny.
He was like, how many years is this going to be with the Pacers? And I'm starting season 16. And, I was telling him the number one question I get is, how are you there for that long? What's your secret for success or secret for longevity? And, number one thing is just, I've had a very stable, team owner, front office. They've been great people that I've worked with. And so when you see upheaval, like front offices changing every few years, that's when you see guys like me that are changing every few years. So we've had great stability in Indiana. But tied into that, for my rock number 3 would be, you hear a lot of coaches talk about building trust with athletes. And obviously that's very important. And what I rarely see talked about is building trust in or from your front office people, or maybe athletic directors, your team owner. And I think that just learning, when you walk into a different office, the conversation changes. The conversation that you have when you're in the head athletic trainer's office is different than the conversation that you have in the head coach's office, is different than the general manager's office. You have to know, again, kind of like Coach Boyle says in the book, but what's your why? Everybody has a different why. So if I go into the front office and they're asking me about a specific player, I have to think how they're thinking. So being able to communicate in a way, and rather than just saying, yeah, he squats 14 times his body weight, or something crazy, just to prove how great I've been doing. What's the deeper meaning? What does he really want to know out of this? And maybe the guy is really strong in the weight room, but why isn't it translating to the court? So I think being able to go in and having different conversations with different stakeholders is really important.
Love it. Yeah. And along those same lines, we've been talking with the different coaches about relationships, building relationships. And when you're building those relationships without, more than just this superficial piece, then you can really start to understand somebody a little better when you get in there and you're present within those conversations, and you start to understand what they're going to want or what they're going to know or what they want from you, or what the answer, what kind of an answer do they want? Not
Right.
that saying that you're going to structure the answer, but the language that you're speaking, similar to, you're speaking coach, you're speaking GM, you're speaking,
Right.
Athletic trainer. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting way to look at it, because I think, yeah, you're right. Too many people don't talk about other colleagues when they talk about some of these things. Shawn, I'm definitely, I've been saying this to everybody. You're not going to get over, I'm not going to let you get away with this one. The one thing you would do over, you got to pick something. It can't be like, hey, I learned from all my mistakes, but is there something that you would kind of do over, whether that's, picking different, the way you hired staff, the way you worked with management? What would you feel like you would do over in the time that you've been there?
Never made a mistake. No, there are a lot of things I would do over, personally and professionally. It's hard to say one. It's really difficult. I think I kind of touched on it earlier, of just better work-life balance. I wish I could have figured that out earlier. And it's something that it still consumes me, and just like anybody else who's striving for that work-life balance in what we do, it's trying to be mindful every day of, okay, this can wait till tomorrow. I don't need to call somebody at 9:30 or send that email at 11:30 just because it came in. I want to get it off my plate. Just And I think as we all get older, and some of us that have kids, you lose work-life balance, you lose your hobbies. And I would tie hobbies into work-life balance. Like, at this point, I don't even know what the hell I do in my free time. So, I mean, that's one thing I would do over, is be more mindful from a earlier age. But, I think we're all so consumed with trying to make your mark, trying to create job stability or show your worth, that you let work bleed into your personal life.
Yeah, I always like Craig Ballantyne said in my book, he said, there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's work-life mastery. So that the scales are always going to be tipped. Like, for example, in season, 75% might have to go to work, right? But when you're home, you got to be home. And that's really important. But and also knowing, hey, look, okay, in a couple months in the off season, I need to switch that balance over. And so it's kind of mastering that time. I always like the way he put that, because in order to be successful, you do have to work a ton in the beginning, especially.
Yeah. And then part of that is, I know that we're going to talk about young up and comers, and sometimes that's saying no to them. A lot of people are asking you for your time, and that time comes again from maybe your personal time of, do you want to jump on a call and talk about your career path or give me career advice? And, it's hard to say no to somebody who's young and hungry, but sometimes you just have to draw the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then let's segue that into the what would you tell up and coming strength coaches first, how to how should they approach somebody who's that busy, and also what would you tell them to be successful in this profession? Again, not in the NBA, just as a strength coach.
Yeah, I think building your network is so important, but it's how you build your network. And the people that I interact with most that are the young strength coaches are the people that really seem to frame things in the right way. They spell my name correctly. They don't just use my Twitter handle and say, "Dear Mr. Swindle," or whatever it is. But it's the people that they're not just constantly asking. It is more of here's one or two questions that I'm seeking insight for. Don't give me your whole recipe on how you've been with the Pacers for this long, or what should I major in? And, there's a lot of different approaches that just kind of turn me off. So you have to build your network, but I think start with just a couple of insightful questions. Don't always ask for something. If you create a correspondence, maybe try to see what problems they're having, and maybe there's something that you could help them with. I think that, so many of us that are old and tired, we have problems that whether it's time or manpower, and if somebody offers a solution or a unique set of eyes, we can learn a lot from young strength coaches because they're seeing the world in a different lens than we are. So, that would be kind of step one. And then to expand on that, I would say, with all of the technology that we have, I see younger coaches losing an eye for coaching. They're relying on the report to tell them how far a guy ran. You can go back and look at force plate data, or look at, whatever source of information you're collecting, but you've missed the qualitative piece of that. How did the guy jump when he was on the force plate? When he was running during the game, did it look like his normal gait? We've really lost, from what I have seen, the ability to assess somebody based off from their movements. I think we're just relying far too much on technology.
I love that. And we do hear that a lot from coaches that say, that is something that people are losing. Also, along the same lines, it's the same idea, communication. Younger people are losing that ability to communicate because they've done it through texting or through social media. And then when they get in person, they don't have those social skills that because they don't develop them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's a different world, and I don't want to be that guy that says my generation is better than yours, because every generation says that.
Yeah.
So everybody adds something to the table, and we can learn a lot from the up and coming coaches, no question in my mind. But I just don't. I don't think that you should rely solely on technology. You have to develop that eye, and you have to have that relationship with the player to really understand what's going on that particular day.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I think when we look at this idea about kind of the younger generation. So I was listening to something recently, and they were saying, listen, you have to remember, you have to give this generation a little bit of a break, because a lot of what they get is free. For example, they get a lot of information on YouTube, on Google, they get all of this stuff free. So sometimes they ask for stuff without really understanding, instead of saying, hey, Mr. Swindle, can I take you to lunch or coffee? Or can I pay you for time? I've had a couple people said, hey, listen, can we get on the phone? I'll pay you for your time. I want to know about podcasting, blah, blah, blah. Or, I just got a gift in the mail because somebody asked me about publishing and a book. And I said, let's just get on the phone. And they sent me a coffee mug and a shirt from their gym. I mean, those are the kind of things that you want to make sure you're doing. And like you said, anything you can do to help, always help. Always do that first. Try to offer them help first. And I think it's interesting. You're right. Sometimes they think, how can I help Shawn Windle? He's a highly successful professional coach. I have nothing to offer him, but there's something out there. So,
there's no question. When people think that I have all the answers because they're looking up to me for my experience, I don't have all the answers. I need to learn from other people. That's how most of us get to where we're at, is we rely on information from other people, how to learn how to do it a better way, or, a different lens. So
absolutely.
I hate when they look to me thinking that I have all the answers.
Awesome. Well, what you can do is, we really appreciate you coming on the show. First of all, this has been great. It's been 13 years. Awesome. And, I'll send you the link. So when they ask you a question, say, listen to this at the 32-minute mark, about 20 minutes, you'll get all you need to know about my career. So, but Shawn, thanks so much for doing this. Really looking forward to continuing to follow your career. So we appreciate this.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, so for the next segment here, we have our third guest ever, Shawn Hayes. He is now with the University of Georgia, and he was at the time with the Buffalo Bills. Shawn, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time, so it's great to reconnect and talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were with the Buffalo Bills. 2007, was that your first year, second year? I forget at the time. Where were you at the time with the Bills?
Yeah, that was my second year. I was there from 2006 to 2010.
Okay, cool. And you were with Clemson before that, working with their basketball team, and you worked with Harvard before that. So you were used to the collegiate programs. You were there with the Bills till 2010, and then went back to college. Talk to us a little bit about like the run from the last time we talked to you, were at the Bills for 2 more years, then you went to Georgia. Give us an overview of that career, your career in the last 13 years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was hired here in the summer of 2010, and I was blessed to come down here and join a great athletic association. And when I first got hired on, I worked 3 sports, and I was hired as an assistant strength coach. I did men's basketball, volleyball, and women's golf. So it's kind of neat to kind of get back to training other sports that I really hadn't worked with in a while, since probably when you look back at the other sports, and I was doing those at Harvard. And it was great to get back and reconnect with I'll joke around, say the youth of America, just because when you're in that professional setting, you're dealing with, grown men that are trying to, make a living, and it's a different setting, different environment, different training goals, and, different personalities, and just work with male sports to come back to college athletics and have a chance to work with some female sports again was great for me. I got 2 daughters, so it was kind of it was very interesting to me because I do have 2 daughters that play sports, and I was fortunate in 2014 to be promoted to the associate director, and we hired more staff on as we expanded. So now I'm just working with men's basketball and women's volleyball, and having a great time and success doing that.
Yeah, let me ask you though. I wasn't planning on asking this actually, but so when you were at Harvard, so things have changed a little bit. You were at Harvard, you're the director of strength conditioning, but you were 41 varsity sport program. You like oversaw the whole thing. Is that a little bit different now? Is there more like we have more staff in the collegiate setting?
Yeah, it was it was definitely an experience going there, being the first full-time strength coach and trying to establish that program. And they've done a great job building off of that through the new strength coaches. And I know Coach Frazier's there now doing a great job. But when I look back, when I first started off, my first assistant was Mike Potenza, and he was a $10,000 a year paid assistant, and he helped me out as much as he could. And obviously we know what Mike's doing now and having the success he's having. But, by year 2, they let me hire a full-time assistant, a strength coach named Jody Nash, who went on to work at UNLV and I moved out of the field now and is a high school teacher. But, when you look back and you look at different, staffs, the right thing to do is expand because there is so much stress. And I think emphasis put on strength and conditioning these days that if you don't have more coaches and more staff to help these athletes out, we're doing them a disservice. And we're here to make those 4 or 5 years the best years and experience of their life. And we need to do the right things for them. And I think the college administrations are now seeing that and expanding and providing those resources for our student athletes these days.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about, okay, so like we said, your second year with the Bills, we had, by the time I had talked to you, it was very close to you're right in the middle of the season. It was towards the end of the season that year. And you spent another 2 years there, like we said, and went to Georgia. So give us just 3 big things kind of over the years that you've really learned during that time since, the last time you were on the show.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is, and I think it gets harder with age. I'm 46 now. Is I've learned that I can adapt to any situation, any coaching personality as I've gotten older. And I think a lot of strength coaches, and I thought I was going to have a tough time with this because I've had coaching changes here. And that's one thing that I'm proud of. I think that's one thing that was very hard for me initially, but I've learned that I can adapt even as I get older. And that's the name of the game. And I think if we're not adapting, we're not learning, we're not, evolving, even as we get older, I think as a profession, we're going to get left in the dust. And as because that's important, that's huge importance. That's one of the first thing that I really have learned is to learn to adapt and understand that you need to change with the times. That was a big one for me. The next one is probably one of the most important ones is always make time for your family. And when you're younger and you're single and you're trying to, work your way up the ladder, I don't think sometimes we all think about, we're going to have a family one day and I'm going to spend time with my kids one day. And then one day I had kids and I was like, man, I gotta find time. And, that was one of the biggest things with me was finding a great balance between work and family because we do work 12 hours a day. We do work 60 hours a week. There are those times a year. And if you don't find that balance and find that time, it's tough. And then to go along with that is I learned as I got older is not to take my emotions of work, the bad days of work home with me. And initially, I think I did that. I think I did that when my kids were younger because I am very passionate about what I do. I think all strength coaches are very passionate about what they do. And when you have a bad day at work, sometimes it does roll over. And that was one thing I had to learn as I got older is, hey, when I walk in that door, I'm hanging up whatever was at work on the outside in the garage and smiling and want to play with my 2 kids. And that was hugely important for me. And then probably the third one is, I've got to, as a strength coach, everybody gets caught up in this social media presence and the social media pressure. And I think one thing that I had to learn along the way is I had to find out, do what's best for my teams, do what's best for me in my situation, and not worry about what anybody else is doing. And I think we get caught up in that as strength coaches because there is so much social media presence these days. And I mean, I fell into it. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody. I tried some gimmicks. I tried some things, and I realized they didn't work for me. So I learned I had to fail a little bit to be able to move on and make things great in my program and focus on that, and really just be great at what I need to be great at, and not really worry about what someone else was trying to do. How can I make my Georgia athletes great? How can I do what's best for them? That was huge, and I probably always use this phrase is in that situation of doing what's best for my programs is don't try to shove a square peg in a round hole. I know my situation. I know my weight room. I know my equipment. I know my resources. So let's focus on that and let's be great at that. So those are probably some of the three things that I would point out as some of the biggest learning, things along the way, and three things that I can take with me that I'm pretty proud of that I've learned and being able to kind of move forward and progress my career.
Yeah, it's funny because two of the things there, Shawn Skahan really kind of touched on as well. And that was, the family thing and how relationships can suffer. And I know, when you were in the pros, you're probably traveling a little bit more. And football's a little easier because you have a couple days off, not really off, but you can probably stay at home. Whereas like with hockey, he was traveling, and he said the same thing about really, and I talked about my core value of running your own race and not looking, you guys had the exact same thing, like stop looking around the corner because your situation is always going to be unique to different colleges, even in your section, even in your conference, whatever, that it's going to be completely different. And you really can't look at them. You have to worry about. It's interesting though that, we all end up really learning a lot of the same things over time.
It's crazy, but it's right. Is you want to do, and you can't help it, right? Because there is such a social media presence. There's everything at your fingertips now, and some things look great. I've got a great buddy of mine who does a really cool kind of competition with one of his basketball programs, and I would love to be able to do that, but I don't have the space, the resources, in that environment to do that. So you have to adapt to what to your situation, because no one knows your situation better than you. So you just have to adapt in those situations and make it best for you and your team.
Yeah, and I think too, a lot of people get caught up. Shawn and I talked about this as well. Shawn Skahan was chasing those letters with trying to really keep up with education, but also now as well, it could be difficult with budgets and for different teams. Is the technology piece of it? It's hard to keep up with some of this stuff, and you got to remember, like, hey, look, you know what, you got to do what you can.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Things are changing and things are evolving, and part of that is going to be, like you're saying, budgets are going to be different now with what's going on in this world. So how you progress yourself and how you do things is going to be a different look at that, no doubt.
Now, I told you this before, and I've told the other coaches, look, I'm not giving anybody a pass on this. You got to give me one do-over over all these last 13 years that maybe you'd say, I might have done this differently. I might have approached this situation differently. Give us one thing you might want to do over on.
Yeah. So, I'll tell you, I look back and there's always a couple different things you can say, hey, what if I did this? What if I did that? And a do-over is tough, because I'm very happy where I am in my career and with my family. But, I look back at Harvard, and there's two incidents at Harvard. One is, I don't know if I would have left as quickly as I did, because I think at a young age, you listen to a lot of outside people. And everybody's like, oh, what's the next job? What's the big job? You want to chase the big job. And I got to be honest with you, although it was very hard, and I worked some long hours at Harvard being by myself and having a part-time employee for the first year, year and a half or so before I got a full-time assistant. Everybody tell you, you got to go, you want to be Power 5, you want to be a big conference. And I think I listened to a lot of people saying that to me, and I probably wish I could look back and say, what if I stayed there a little bit longer? I had a great relationship with Coach Murphy, the football coach, the hockey coach, both men's and women's. And, they just hired a new men's hockey coach at the time too. I think it was Coach Donato, and, we got along really well. So, I look back and I probably just should have done a better job just listening to people that matter in my life and not all the outside voices. And I would have probably liked to see what happened if I stayed at Harvard a little bit longer. I really do. But, I think as a young strength coach, you always think the grass is greener, and that's what people tell you. And I think that's one thing that is hard not to listen to, and it was hard not to see the grass was greener going to Clemson, the ACC and big school. So I that's probably one do-over I'd like to take back, because I mean, I love my time at Clemson, but I think I still would have ended up where I'd be if I didn't go there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. And I think you're right. It's not just strength coaches, but young people. Young people have to always realize that the grass isn't always greener. It's an important piece. And once you realize that, you stop chasing some of that stuff. So great segue into the last question, which is an up and coming strength coach. Really, you can only tell them one or two things, like, look, and it doesn't have to be for college or pros, either one, just in general, strength coach. What would you tell them to be successful in the profession?
The first one I would say is build relationships. That's one thing that I've always prided myself on, is always having great relationships with everybody that you've ever worked with. And that's important for me, because I look back and there's still some people back at my first full-time job at Tulsa, or even go back one step further when I was a GA at Springfield College, that I can still call right now and talk to and feel comfortable having a great conversation, because, you leave on good notes and you build relationships, and I think that's the hardest thing for our young coaches today, because you talked about it just before, about this technology driven, field now. And I get it. It's so important to have, to advance technologies and use things at your resources. But, I was joking around with an intern the other day, and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. That's great that you know how to use GPS and you know how to use force plates, but does a GPS unit hire anybody? And he kind of stopped and looked at me, and I was like, no. I said, they don't. I said, people hire people. So you need to learn how to culture and foster relationships, so you can one day ask for a reference, one day, call and get some help, or, whatever it might be. And you just never know where someone down the line can help you out. So I always tell people, I always tell these young kids, smile and talk to everybody, because nothing's all that bad, right? You know what I mean? So that would be my second one as I go into that segue, is that, always smile and say hello to everybody. Administration, whether it be, a building worker, a facilities worker, life is not that bad. Let's have a good day. And if you always are having a bad day and you always have a frown on your face, no one wants to build relationships. No one wants to build off of that, that's so important, right? So when you're always having a good day and you're smiling, you're building relationships, as we work on, kind of work off those 2 points, is, like, you want to work so hard and be that kind of person that's irreplaceable. My dad taught me that when I was at a young age. You always want to make sure that you're irreplaceable at your work. So that all kind of ties in together for me, and I always try to tell these young interns and young strength coaches who I work with and come across, and whoever I can touch, you just get to the point where you're building great relationships. You're always smiling. You're always in a good mood. You're always putting forth a great effort, and be irreplaceable. And when you can do those kind of things, you're going to be successful. The rest falls into place. And I truly believe that.
Absolutely. I think if you listen to anybody who talks about personal development or growth or business or success, they, in my book, was something that came up all the time, was really kind of building those relationships. And I think there was a book that Coach Boyle always referenced, said, trying to be the happiest person in the room, right? Always try to be the happiest person in the room. And
Amen.
You become approachable, and people will remember you. So, but Coach Hayes, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. It's such an amazing career. It's really a model strength and conditioning career. You've had your ups and downs, but really, you've left a great mark, and you're doing some great things down there. So we really appreciate you coming on and going over, what's been happening over the last 13 years.
Absolutely. And I appreciate having me on. And like I said before, it's great catching up, and it's always good to catch up with old friends and talk again and reminisce about the old times and the good times and what's happening. So I appreciate your time.
All right. So another segment of today's special episode, somebody who over the last 13 years I've always kind of called on to do, help me with any of my projects, whether that was my book or other podcasts. And that's Brijesh Patel. And it's funny, at the time, he was the assistant coach at Holy Cross. He was doing some things with what they called the SB Coaches College, lots of education back then. He was working with Jeff Oliver, and but now he's at Quinnipiac, and we're gonna let him just kind of go over his career. B, thanks for doing this, man.
And thanks for having me on. And as always, I love talking to you.
All right. Of course, the fifth episode. Of course, I do. I always think of you when it comes to these things. And I think, my audience appreciates it. So tell us, okay, so you're at the assistant at Holy Cross. I forget how many years you were there, in 2007. So how long were you there afterwards? And when did you start at Quinnipiac? What was the original role? And what's your role now?
Yeah. So back in 2007, I was going on my 4th year, and I think we talked in the fall or December, something like that. And in the following summer in 2008, the Quinnipiac job came open, and I fortunately was able to get it. And so I've been here since 2008, and it's been remarkable to see that kind of growth of the university, but also like our strength conditioning program, because I was the first full-time strength conditioning coach here. So it was a real unique opportunity for myself, and being able to start a program from scratch, and building something, and building, our philosophy, and instilling our philosophy, instilling our system of training, and how we're going to coach, and how we want to, act as athletes, and how we want to prepare, and all those types of things across our whole athletic department. When I started, my title was head strength conditioning coach. And I was told, my primary responsibilities are men's and women's basketball and men's and women's ice hockey. And those were our sports of emphasis. And those are the ones that, we really wanted to try to take the next jump with athletically, because we realized, the president of the school at the time realized, that athletics was a huge avenue for, helping growth and helping marketing of our entire institution. And so fortunately during that time, we were able to grow, and we were able to get better, and we were able to really impress upon all of our student athletes how important preparation is, and year-round preparation, and really developing a really strong mindset and attitude towards training, physically, but also mentally too. And those are the types of things that we do when we're in the weight room. But and that role has evolved, where I was able to hire a staff where we started with one full-time and a part-time assistant. Now I have 2 full-times, as well as I had a GA. Right now, at this moment, we've just got a paid intern in that role, and we're going to get another full-time staff. So we've kind of gone from one weight room operation to myself, to 2 varsity weight rooms, a staff, internship program, website that we've created. We've did a cookbook, and just countless educational materials for our coaches, and especially in the times of COVID. We've really been involved in helping with practice planning, and helping with monitoring training load, and our return back to activity progression. And over that time, I think my role and what I do has grown. And just recently, our athletics department has, they upgraded my title and made me an associate athletic director of athletic performance. So it's nice to be able to have a seat at the table with the administrators, and be looked at upon a little bit differently than just a strength conditioning coach who's in the weight room, but really as a leader within our athletic department. So I can't believe it's been 13. I'm going to my 13th year here. It's wild.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I know, it's so true. I feel like I remember when you got there, and pretty soon after, the program was so successful, and you guys went to a national championship. And I know there's been so many great players to come out from a hockey perspective. That's what I follow. My man Devontae's, who is just got traded. No
longer your man now.
I know. I can't like him anymore, but no, I'll always be rooting for him from that connection. But yeah, it's been great to see the program grow, and so on that note, really, especially because of your journey from assistant strength coach with Jeff at Holy Cross, and then becoming a strength coach, and having a smaller role now with a staff. And a bigger title, and more teams. What are the 2, 3, 4, whatever things that the big rocks that you've learned over the 13 years?
One, I think I've always kind of been good at, and it's time management. It's really being able to understand how to manage your time more effectively and more efficiently, so that you can handle all the day-to-day responsibilities that you have to be able to perform. And along that is being a husband and being a father at the same time too. Just but making sure that you've got systems and processes in place at your day-to-day job that aren't going to monopolize all of your time, right? And so much of that comes down to your level of preparation, your level of detail, but really just being organized, like understanding, like, like keep a calendar. Like there's so many apps that you can be able to use to help manage your thoughts and manage your time, but really just making sure that you can manage your time effectively, that so you can help each and every single individual that you're fortunate enough to be able to work with to the best of your ability. And whether that be a coach, that be a trainer or a doctor or the athlete, or even like your family time is just making sure that you can build in systems and processes that where especially in the student athletes case, where they don't need you to hold their hand all the time, right? I think so many young coaches are they can end up being personal trainers and they cater to kids, and I don't think we can do that, and I don't think that's a very efficient use of your time. Is you've got to be able to build some ownership within the athlete, that they understand how to take care of themselves and how they can manage like handling recovery stuff on their own if you're busy with another team. So little things like that. I think time management is of the essence. I think that's probably a big one that I've learned over 13 years, especially because all I had to do was manage myself and then essentially managing a staff, and then trust them as well. So that's probably the big one. Another big thing that I think I've learned over the last 13 years, and it's not so much like leadership or management, but it goes along with, like, I guess a science part of it, is understanding the value of fascia in regards to training and how we can ultimately impact it to really help athletic development as best as we can and try to reduce the chance of injury. It's something that I've taken a deep dive into over the last probably year and a half, probably close to 2 years now. I've been able to connect with Bill Parisi on this as well, being able to use some game-changing technology that's out there now that Perform Better carries, the Ohm Run. So that's been able to impact my philosophy and how we train, and how we can really help our student athletes become the best that they can be within their sport. So that's two. You asked for another one, right?
Yeah, one more.
I got another one. I got more for you too, probably. But I guess the other thing that I've learned too is appreciation of biomechanics in neurology, and how everything that a student athlete or an individual or a client, whoever you may work with, everything in their life is going to impact what you can do with them. And really being able to understand how you can't just look at what you do in a silo, and you can't look at just what you do from a training standpoint, whether it be in the weight room, as an isolated event, and really getting to understand how every other factor in their environment or in their life is impacting them neurologically as well as biomechanically and physically, right? Because everything's a stressor, and everybody uses this analogy, but like everything in life is a different type of stress, right? Your brain can't differentiate if you've got a physical stress, a social stress, a psychological stress, financial stress, whatever it may be. Like it's going to have the same effect upon the body each and every single time. You just got to make sure that you can understand all those different types of stressors, so that when you put a physical stress on an athlete, do you understand what the response may be, and how that's going to affect them for everything else that they're going to have to do. And in my situation, it's they have to be able to practice and they need to be able to perform. So I need to make sure and understand, if somebody's tired, did they get a good night's sleep? Do they, were they studying for an exam? Did they break up with a significant other? Did they get in a fight? Are they, did they have a meeting with a coach? Did they, all these other factors, COVID, like that's affecting everybody too. So being able to understand and appreciating that training doesn't happen in a box. It's not an isolated event, and that everything kind of really plays a role into how good you can make an athlete.
Absolutely. And I know, you're somebody who's always been not only on the forefront of educating others, but obviously always looking to learn new things. You can even remember, I think it was that Functional Strength Coach 1, where you and Jeff were, talking about some of the stuff that you guys were doing and you guys were working on. It was always an experiment, and just, one of the first people to work with RPR, and like you said, now like really taking a deep dive into fascia. And I know you've always been somebody. So would you say though, because it's funny because a couple of the Shawns were saying that they would, they felt like sometimes they were chasing things. Would you say you've done a good job from you getting educated of really taking deep dives, like when you were into RPR, when you first learned RPR, to really go deep into RPR? When you got into obviously fascia, you already knew about it, but you're going really deep with it. Would you say that's been an advantage to try to really focus on something without chasing all of the letters?
Yeah, well, I think what happens is, right, so when you learn something new and you take one of those deep dives, like the purpose of that is to truly understand it. Because if you can understand it, then you can understand how to and how it's going to impact you. So I think it's important to take a deep dive and be able to look at things from all different angles so that you can apply it into your setting, however you seem fit. But I think it's also important to understand that you've got to be able to come out of that rabbit hole at the same time too. Because if you live in the rabbit hole, then you're going to start losing sight of everything else that you might have done that are probably important too. And I think Coach Boyle talks about like your big rocks. Like you got to make sure you have your big rocks. And then it's important when you learn something new, take a look at it, take a deep dive into it, try to truly understand it. And then you see, like, is it going to help my system? Or is it not going to help my system? Is it something that I can use on an individual case by case basis, or do I need to be able to implement it with everybody? And I think that's really important to understand too, is like, I have taken some of those deep dives and I think I've gotten away from some core values at some times, but I was aware enough to be able to understand that I needed to get back out and get back to our core values, because that's probably where our bread and butter was going to be. And that's what was going to yield the most gains for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's always a danger of, especially somebody like you who's always looking for an edge, looking for to advance your brain and your training and helping people, that we could get a little caught up in certain things. So with that being said, give me one thing, and I'm not letting anybody have a pass on this one, is that you would do over. One thing you would say, man, if I had to do it all over again, I might not have done it this way. I might have kind of tried to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back. I mean, it was actually a lesson I learned at Functional Strength Coach 1 was, man, I think I was 24, 25 at the time. And I honestly, like, I thought I knew it all. You know what I mean? Like, and we all get to those stages of our personal development where we think we know it all. And, Mike was up there talking about fascia and talking about Stuart McGill and talking about Porterfield and DeRosa and foam lacrosse ball in your feet. Like, and I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. And I was like, man, like this guy is one of the best and he doesn't stop. So I needed to realize, like, you know what, like this journey never ends. Like I never can think that I know it all, because if I think I know it all, then I'm not delivering the best product and service that I can. So I need to be able to stay humble, have a beginner's mindset and have a beginner's attitude, and realize that I don't know everything, and develop, I learned this afterwards, develop a growth mindset and realize that there's always something that you can improve, and there's always something you can get better at. You just got to constantly try to find and seek out those ways and seek out those methods and seek out other people. But it's a never ending journey. So it's having humility and being humble.
Love it. So true. So true. And everything we've been talking about, really, we could just repeat for this next question. But if I had to tell you, like, all your interns are coming back, all the guys, all the young guys are coming, young guys and girls are coming back, and you have one time next Monday, you're going to give them a little lecture, and it's only going to be like 10 minutes on what can they do, 1, 2, 3 things that you would tell them, up and coming strength coaches, to be successful. What's going to be the big things that you're going to tell them?
Coach. That's probably the biggest thing, is that, like, I don't think young coaches understand how to really connect with another human being to get them to do what you want them to do, right? So the essence of what we do is trying to get other people to listen to us, trying to get other people to do what we want them to do, right? That's the essence of coaching, so they can help themselves and get better. But so much of that comes down to your ability to connect and to relate to people and to be able to read people. I think a lot of young strength coaches and young fitness professionals are into tech and into the data, which is all good. But like at the end of the day, we work with human beings. And so we need to be able to understand human beings to be able to connect and reach human beings. So not losing sight of like developing as a coach, developing yourself as a person, developing yourself as a human being, because those are the things I think that really help you become a better coach and have a long career in this.
Yeah, it's funny. We're talking, all day today to different coaches, for this episode, and Coach Boyle was talking about one of the things that you want to do is coach they don't need you, and then so obviously that's like teaching and teaching them how to coach, and Coach Windle also kind of said the same thing. I know you guys talked today. You were talking a lot about that, about not coaching, not learning the art of coaching, and the only way really to learn the art of coaching is to really to get in there and coach.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like it's like I will never take back the days of when I interned for Mike, and my days as a student assistant intern at UConn, working for Jeff as an intern, because I learned how to coach. Like I coached so much. Like they were long days and they were hard, and they were you're just trying to figure out how to connect and how to reach people and what words would work and for different situations in different cases. And you're putting in the proverbial 10,000 hours, right? You're putting in all that time and you're putting all those hours, and that's how you get really good. Like that's how you get really good as a coach, to the point when you're in it for 20, 25, 30 years. You've seen everything and you understand how to reach different individuals and different people. But again, you have to keep in the back of your head, like stay humble, and you don't know it all, but you've seen a lot, and a lot of it comes down to just human interaction.
Absolutely. And I've seen you coach a few times. You are one of the best for sure. I will tell people, if you want to see a great coach in action, you got to take a ride up to Quinnipiac. But Coach, thank you so much for doing this. As always, I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything that you've done for this industry and for my Islanders as well. So thanks a lot, Coach.
You got it, Anthony. Thank you very much.
All right, now we have one more special interview. It's with the episode 7 strength and conditioning coach. She was at the University of Oklahoma. When I looked at that, I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot she was there. Sarah Cahill. Sarah, thanks for doing this.
And thanks so much for having me on this. And thanks for making me feel so old.
Sorry.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess because you and I have really kind of kept in touch, obviously, over the years. And, you've had, like I said before, like a really kind of eclectic background now with just, you were like, you told the story on the podcast originally. You were an athlete, you went to Mike's, to MBSC to train, fell in love with it. Did amazing when you went back to school, fell in love with so much that you became a strength coach, and you were in the collegiate world for a bit. And it's just interesting to me, like your path. I guess, like I said, I've been there along for the ride, and I totally forgot you were there. But give us a rundown of like really the last 13 years, like after Oklahoma.
Yeah, so after Oklahoma, I ended up having a call from Anthony Slater out with, Athletes Performance. He was starting a new kind of component of that company called Core Performance Center with Mark Verstegen. And he called me to see if I'd be interested in a position in Los Angeles at that facility. very much in kind of the beginning stages of that. And so I said yes and went out there for about 2.5 years. And it was one of the most amazing experiences I've had, just in terms of really understanding what it's like to build and create something from sort of the ground up. And the coach training that they did with us was really amazing. And then after about 2.5 years, my sister was going through some stuff. I believe I reached out to Mike and just kind of let him know that I was looking for an opportunity in Boston and just to put some feelers out there if he knew of any. And ended up getting a call from Northeastern University, Art Horn, saying that they had a position if I'd be interested in it and in applying for it. So I ended up going out there and meeting the team, Art and Dan Zuski and the team over there. And it was perfect timing because, personally, I wanted to be closer to home, to be there a bit more for my sister. So I moved home, took a position there, trained about 18 and learned a ton. And then being at Northeastern, it's right in a community of Boston that I didn't know a lot about. It's in, really right in the middle and the heart of that city. And so while I was there, I kind of felt like I didn't know what the community around me was like. So I ended up going into what's called the Sport and Society program and asked them if they knew of any community foundations or organizations that were doing anything along the lines of health and wellness. And they told me about this place called Inner City Weightlifting. And long story short, I ended up meeting the founder, John Feynman, around 2010 and fell in love with the program. What they do is they take those that have been most impacted by mass incarceration and helps them kind of amplify their voice and agency by helping them get into fields they're interested in. And one of the fields is personal training. And just by meeting people from the same part of the city that I was working in that had like such minimal access to opportunity was really an eye-opener for me. So I ended up falling in love with that program. And around the same time, it was when Mike came back on board with USA Hockey, and he was looking for some support staff to help him out with that team. So he ended up reaching out, and USA Hockey ended up reaching out with some opportunities there. And so I ended up taking a role with USA Hockey back with Mike, and then basically decided that I really wanted to jump in at Inner City Weightlifting and kind of do those together. So that's what I did for a while. Right up until I had our first child. And from there, actually ended up deciding to be with my son pretty much full time. I was the site director at Inner City Weightlifting and felt like I was kind of doing both average. Like I was not crushing motherhood and not crushing it at Inner City Weightlifting. And I don't operate well when I feel like I'm not all in. So I decided to stay home and really take care of him. And while I was home, I got the itch. I was like, okay, this isn't for me either. I have so much respect for mothers and parents that do that. But it wasn't for me. So I was like, okay, what can I do now? And so I came up with this concept, and that's where I'm at now. And that was a very long-winded answer, but that's the last 13 years.
Well, give us, what is the concept?
Yeah, so I've been hanging out with a lot of preschoolers. My son is now 4, our son, and we have another little one as well now. But so I'd be kind of at playgrounds a lot and talking to other moms, and they had so many questions about like, when should you teach your child to throw and catch? And, having their children on the structures, I'd see them kind of hovering and holding their hands while they were climbing. And I was like, hey, it's good to let them fall sometimes. And this is clearly if they're open to, learning from me. I would never say that to someone I didn't know. But if they were asking me questions, I realized that parents had no idea like about motor development, especially with even the preschool ages. And the fact that like, just let them explore and let them try walking and moving and falling in different surfaces. And at the same time, I actually decided to do an audit of the state of physical education. And it was not an organized audit. I didn't use like a market research company or anything. I just did it myself. I called public health departments and I was like, hey, how much physical education are the schools in your district providing children with. And I called a district in California that had 150 elementary schools, and they had 0 physical educators in any of them.
Wow.
And when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh, like parents and caregivers don't know how important movement is, because we should be pushing for PE in school. So the concept is essentially, it's called Movement in a Box. It's a subscription box that comes to parents and caregivers of preschoolers. And it just helps them start to play with different learning activities while moving. And I kind of partnered with some people to create this, but the idea is to really have families move together, and you can teach your children like shapes and the alphabet and counting while doing these really fun movement games. And I've incorporated kind of the beginnings of fundamental movement skills. So it's really just to get into that age group and get into parents' minds, like, hey, your kids probably don't learn best sitting in chairs, just to start to get that into people's minds a little bit early.
Absolutely love that. It's obviously, 30 years ago, we probably wouldn't have said we needed something like this, right? And
Right.
but now it's totally different and brilliant idea. I love it. And I know obviously your time at Inner City like shaped this like really planted a seed in kind of like you talked about helping the community and being part of the community, and you were seeing what was going on. And I can tell you right now, so many businesses fail because they come up with an idea that doesn't have really a need. So people think they can cook, so they should open a restaurant, or they're in good shape, so they shouldn't open a gym. When it's really the other way around, hey, look, you saw a need and you developed this idea based on that need, which is brilliant, and which means it's gonna be super successful.
Thank you. I hope so. And yeah, I'm open to learning. I definitely don't know anything about starting a business other than some practical experience, but I'm on Coursera courses right now. And if anyone has any advice, I am all ears.
All right.
No idea what I'm doing.
It's kind of funny too. If you look back at, I visited you guys at Core Performance that time, and if you took that concept right now, based on the lockdown, that is actually the best concept that you could possibly have. The pod system is really what would work, especially now with gyms, and so many people are trying to replicate that. And Mark was so ahead of his time with that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I totally agree.
Sarah, let's just go over, because like I said, what a crazy background you've had. You've gone, and I love the lesson here for a lot of people is, listen, first of all, and you heard Sarah say it, you can't have all these balls in the air juggling, because what happens is you're not good at any of them. You're good at any of them. You're not great at any of them. And that's what she was talking about with Inner City or being a mom, and she wasn't going all in. And this happens so much, but at the same time, you were a generalist in the fact that you've worked in the private sector with Core Performance and in the university setting, and then really, I don't even know what USA Hockey would be considered. This is like a regular strength coach, but you're kind of a nomad strength coach going all over, and then working with Inner City, and now opening your own business. And that's where people have to be patient and get that kind of experience. But give us 3 big rocks really that you've learned over this last 13 years.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time thinking about this when you sent me kind of the initial email about this opportunity. And this has been great. Thanks again for this. It was really cool for me to be able to kind of reflect back. And I find myself often, like anyone that knows me, I'm constantly asking myself sort of like existential questions, like, why am I here? Like, what's my purpose? And I was working with a life coach right after having my son. I was going through a bit of an identity. I don't know if I called it crisis. I'm sure many, many moms go through this, or parents. And I felt like I was kind of wondering like what my purpose is. Like clearly it's raising children. Like I have a child now, or I had a child. That's a very meaningful purpose. Throughout my career, I've always kind of asked this question, like, what is my purpose? And I've been walking around like almost thinking it like falls out of the sky, or you trip on it, like it's this crumpled piece of paper that you come across. And it was this life coach that told me, you don't find your purpose, you create your purpose. And just like putting it in that way in my mind was so empowering. And it was kind of like, okay, like now in my life, the purpose I'm creating is raising my son. And like, that's my purpose. And it can change. It maybe some people think that you have one purpose and it's just, you do that throughout your whole life and we're all different. But mine has been like in my life right now, like what is my purpose and how can I create that? And it's been a really positive outlook for me to kind of work with. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing I've learned is, without question, reach out to people who inspire you. I have so many times been kind of nervous to pick up the phone, and the first phone call I made, or one of the first ones, was with Meg Ritchie-Stone. And I think somebody recommended I reach out to her, and that was really early on in my career. And I reached out thinking she wouldn't give me the time of day. She ended up talking to me, I want to say, for almost an hour. And the advice she gave me, just from her experience working with male athletes, she was like, always be training, always be able to demonstrate. And this is also something clearly I learned from Coach Boyle time and time again. But know that you're the example you're setting for your athletes, and knowledge is great power. So, as a woman in this field, that was really helpful advice. And so many people are willing to connect and willing to share their stories. So definitely don't be afraid to pick up the phone. And another person I reached out to recently is the woman named Dr. Margaret Whitehead, coined the term physical literacy. When I came across this concept to design movement in a box, I really was fascinated by the years of research she did on this. And I ended up having coffee with her in London. Like I literally just cold emailed her and said I'd be in London. My wife and I were traveling at the time. We were going to be near her anyways. And she was willing to have coffee with me, and just how many people in our field are like that. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and reach out.
Sarah, what was the term she coined? I just lost you right at that. Was it movement literacy?
Oh, physical literacy. Physical literacy.
Okay, cool.
Yep. It's this amazing umbrella term that has really been fascinating for me to dive more into in the past few years. And then the third piece of advice, or the third thing I've learned, is the importance of letting people know the impact they've had on my life and on my career. And this seems like such a basic one. Like, of course, people know what they mean to us, but I remember sitting down and writing Mike a letter. I don't remember what year it was, but he's done so much for me just by really taking a chance on me in my early, athlete days, and just thanking him and saying kind of what impact he's had, or thanking my mom when I had children myself. Like she was a single mom. I had no idea how hard this is, even with a partner. I can't imagine doing this by myself. And, especially right now with COVID and everything, I think it's so important to take that time to let people know how they've impacted you.
So awesome. It's funny. In my book, we do these exercises, and one of them is reaching out to people that you feel like you really you want to learn from, and invite them to lunch. Tell them you want to buy them lunch or coffee or whatever, like just like what you were talking about. And then another one, and this is from Brijesh Patel, was thanking your mentor. So thanking the people that have had an impact in your life, writing them a thank you note. So it's just interesting that you talked about those two things. Well, what would be, and I've told everybody this, we don't give anyone a pass on this question, was the do-over, because although we know, mistakes are a huge part of the learning process and the growth process, there are do-overs that, when we're not talking to anybody, we're like, yeah, I wish I did that better. But what would be the do-over or something you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah. So another one I thought about for a while. I learned this in inner city weightlifting, and there are so many situations I think I could have handled better. But in particular, just when an athlete comes into the weight room, and they're off, in the past, I've tried so hard to get them to buy in. I've almost focused too hard on the people that are off. And whether it be, approach them, ask them questions, I notice them so much. It's like the kid in class that's not paying attention. And I actually would not recommend that approach. Working at Inner City Weightlifting, we had young men that came through our doors. And if you just judge them based on their behavior, you would not be happy with how their behavior is looking. But when you seek to understand the circumstances that they've come from to even get to that door and get into that space, you realize that those circumstances are ones that we probably couldn't even fathom experiencing. And so rather than judging people based on their behavior, just seek to understand the nature of their circumstances. And sometimes the best solution is to just let the athlete be, literally not ignore them, but let them be. Let them have that space. You never know what they've been through. Maybe they just lost a family member. Maybe they just broke up with their significant other. So many times I wish I had gone back and kind of even working with people. If I was managing or whatnot, even interns, to be honest, just letting people have space. And sometimes, yes, asking them if they're okay, that always can be a good question. Other times, they might just need a day. They might just need some space. So that's something that I definitely have learned working at Inner City Weightlifting.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we talk about that with a lot of different coaches who get new jobs and they go in a pro situation. And, look, you got to build that trust. Coach Boyle talked a lot about it when he went to Boston the first year. The first thing he was focused on was learning. He went through the yearbook and looked at what were everybody's names, what were their kids' name, what were their wife's name, where were they from. That was more important than, anything else, learning, giving them that space, allowing them to trust you first before you start getting in and talking about all your philosophy and changing everything that you want to do. I love that. Good job. All right. So somebody's going to call you because they're going to call you from this now. And they're going to say, hey, Sarah, I heard you on the podcast and I need to talk to you really quick. And you only have 5 minutes. So they want to say, look, I want to be successful as a strength and conditioning coach, whether that's pro, college, private sector, whatever it may be. What are you going to tell them? What are those 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're going to say? Look, this is what I really feel like. If you want to be successful in this, do this.
Yeah. So the number one thing that I've tried to do my whole career is I learned it from, I think his name is Joseph Parent. He's a mindfulness Zen teacher that works with a lot of pro golfers. He has this analogy where when you enter a room, empty your glass and then enter that room with your glass empty. Let other people fill it. And I just love that analogy because I think so often we come into spaces with kind of preconceived notions. I mean, I did this in my first job at Oklahoma. I had so much that I had learned. I just wanted to use it and try it. And sometimes the best thing to do first is just listen and observe and just be brilliant at the basics. So entering the room with your glass empty and letting other people fill it, I think is a really good way to start out in any job. And the second piece of advice I'd say is clearly looking at my background. I've worked in many different settings and I have learned so much by taking kind of a diverse background. So I would say diversify your experience. And that's from everything. If you have a job call that's in a different state, I say almost 100% of the time, unless you have personal reasons, obviously, take it. you can always move back home. You learn so much building networks like in other places. I also think when we put ourselves into uncomfortable situations, like that's when we grow the most. So I'd say diversify your experience that way. Diversify your circles, so surrounding yourself with people that might not look like you, might not come from the same background as you. Maybe they disagree with you. I think we can learn so much by having different perspectives in the room. So those would probably be my two main pieces of advice.
I love it. And you certainly have had that diverse background that you've talked about. And this is why I do believe whatever you do from a business perspective is going to be successful, because at this point you've had all these different experiences and you've picked this thing that you see a hole in the world. You see, there's something missing there, and you're trying to fill that hole. And based on all the stuff that you've kind of brought to the table already, I feel personally, and obviously I know you, that it's going to happen. So very cool hearing about the last 13 years, Sarah. You've really, I love this because it's, we've had Shawn Windle, who's been with the Pacers for 13 years. Brijesh Patel, who's been with Quinnipiac almost right after we spoke on the podcast. Shawn Skahan still in the NHL, but he's had a little bit of, he was in the college setting as well for a year and kind of went back. So we've had all these different kind of paths to where everyone is. And I love that you've had this really diverse path. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing your experiences.
Yeah. And thanks so much for having me on. And that's quite a group of people. And I'm grateful for this opportunity, truly. So thank you. And thanks for everything you've done for our field as well. I should write you a letter, Ant. I'm going to do that after we get off.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 300 of the Strength Coach Podcast. I know it was a long one. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all of you who always write in and tell me how much the podcast has impacted you and some of the great things that you've said about the show, and for all those that have left reviews on iTunes or Apple Podcasts as they call it now. So I really appreciate it. Special thanks to Chris Parr and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, I wouldn't be here without them, and it's because of their support over all of these years that have really allowed me to keep doing this and keep bringing this to you. Right now, remember, holiday sale, 40% off on over 100 items. Check it out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle, Shawn Skahan, Shawn Windle, Sean Hayes, Brijesh Patel, Sarah Cahill for sharing their thoughts on the last 13 years and how young strength coaches can be successful. Thanks to Adam and Tim over at Train Heroic. Coach Boyle and I use Train Heroic to deliver all of our online training, so make sure to check out trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Thanks to Jenny Rurick of Fit to Speak. Check her out at fit-2-speak.com. Thanks to Kevin Carr and Brendan Rurick. Check them out at Certified FSC. That's certifiedfsc.com. My name's Anthony Renna. Check all my stuff out, including the show notes at continuefit.com. And that's going to do it. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.